John from Alaska. Just out of curiosity, where do you get your wood? You're up above the tree line there, aren't you? Close to it?
Oh no, we have there's Alaska birch is quite prevalent here,
Okay.
but it's a soft, softer than the birch that you used to back down in America. But no, I'm jealous of you guys for having access to some nice woods. Like I said, I was born and raised in Indiana, and we still have some farms back there, and got all the maple and ash and even walnut there on our property that I can't get here, or at least it's too expensive to send it up here so I can use it.
Because we're going to start. It's at 10 o'clock, and this is Lancaster area Woodturners Thursday morning weekly coffee hour, number 41, believe it or not. My name's John Kelsey. I'll be your host this morning with Doug Reeser assisting. Doug's here somewhere on screen. We got, I see 22 screens now. We'll probably get a couple more before too long. I'm going to show a slideshow to start, and then we're going to go to what do you got? I'm going to do a slideshow on turned porch balusters photographed around Lancaster and other places. My motive for doing this is I'm trying to get a deck built this spring, and I decided I would turn the balusters. I've done this before, and I understand it'll be maybe 150 of them. And I also learned last time I did it that first one took about 45 minutes and the next one took about 20 minutes. And after a while, I got them down to 12 minutes, and, and then so every day you do 10 or a dozen, and pretty soon you're done. So I'm going to take it on. And, but before that, I got to design the puppies. So toward that, I'm going to show you a slideshow on turned porch balusters that I've kind of accumulated. And then I've got some questions to ask you all about what do you think I ought to do? Both in terms of design and in terms of wood. So without further ado, I'm going to share screen. So turned porch balusters, Woodturners coffee hour number 41. Let me see. Next slide. Yes. This is the classical balusters of antiquity. This is from Winterthur in Delaware. You can see them here. It's the classical vase with a ring around it, and a reel at the bottom and a cove, and a round. And you see these everywhere in the world. Here they are at the Metropolitan Museum, a little bit fatter than at Winterthur, but basically the same thing. That's from New York. And here they are in a villa that I photographed near Rincon in Puerto Rico. You'll notice here the columns, instead of being fluted, are sonotube cement columns, and the balusters have lost all their character because they've been cast in concrete. But nonetheless, you still get the look of the classical turned baluster. Okay, now here's what it looks like in Lancaster. This was a particularly nice one I photographed down on, I think, Chestnut Street. Basically the same kind of, but these are turned from wood on a 3-inch block. Very nicely detailed with a ring and a cove and classical form, which is not what we always see in balusters, as you'll see. This is another balcony, I think, from Marietta Avenue, second floor. As the balusters further away, the details become less important because you don't see them. And in fact, in this one, I thought these were classic bottle-shaped or vase-shaped balusters until I took a close look at the slide, and you'll see they have a waist here, making them more into a bottle shape than a classical. And I didn't notice that for a long time, and you would not notice that from the street on this otherwise rather elegant balcony. I'll pause here for any questions or comments that anybody wants to make. I can see all on one screen as I can see the slide share on the other. Here's a comparison of two of the classic bottle shapes. The ones at the top, quite simple, except even on a veranda that turns the corner here, no real ornamentation except a ring at the bottom and a flare at the top, compared to this one below, which has got the ring and it's got more of a base and it's got another ring down here. So at first glance, they look the same, but when you look closer, there's more detail in one than in the other, and I'm not sure how much that matters.
The proportion in the top one doesn't look as nice as some of the others you've shown.
Yes. That's always the issue, and you got the height of the baluster on the one hand and the size of the block you're willing to work with on the other hand. One thing I have noticed, there's no literature on this, so one thing I've noticed is that porch balusters around here anyway always have a square block top and bottom, whereas stair balusters often go straight round into the banister. So those are one of the differences between indoor and outdoor, aside from slenderness. And then sometimes they get tarted up with extra doodads, like a ring here and a ball here and another. I wish I knew what to call this detail. I think of it as a reel, but I'm not sure that is the right name. And in fact, that's one of my broad questions is how did the old guys think about this stuff? What did they call these things? Did they have names for them? Do they, I know that Cindy Drozda, when she makes finials, has her own names for the things. She got one thing she calls an onion. I still think of this as a vase and a ball and a cove and a ring and another cove, but I'd like to know what these things are called if they have names. And then sometimes they're shortened. In this case, the baluster is short, and there's a second rail and then a square block separating it from the top rail on this veranda. And then sometimes they get very, very busy. I quite like this setup. I especially like this post. Can you see my cursor as I'm moving around? I wonder.
Yes.
Yes.
I quite like this post, this symmetrical top to bottom post with again, that real doodad in the middle. And then I don't know what's going on with these. I mean, there's an inverted bottle here, and then there's a square block, and then there's a column and a ring, and they're very close together. And then down here, there's a replication of this one in this grill work, a symmetrical baluster rather than one that has a top and a bottom. And I'm not going to show you the porch post slide set that I've made because that'll just take too long this morning. But in that, you'll see there's an awful lot of confusion in porch posts about which way up the thing goes. Some houses, the fat part is at the bottom, and in other houses, the fat part is at the top. And there seems to be no particular logic for it except what the builder felt like at the time. Now you get a vase on a ball, which is another very common form around here. You see a lot of it. This is one that's on one of the city houses, and it's fairly beat, but it still looks pretty good. And then here's these two houses were next door to each other. Up here, somebody painted the donut and the ball red to match the brickwork, and then this dude painted the donut and the ball green to match his trash can. And what I wonder is, you would not want to take on painting 144 balls. So it seems to me that this is, while fun on a little porch, is not a practical alternative for anything larger. I mean, I might paint them one time in the shop or on the lathe, but I would not be painting them again after the paint deteriorates in the sunshine. And then you get a vase on a cove. Here's, again, the classic vase with a cove at the bottom, ending in a half bead. And then here the cove got kind of long. Again, ending in a half bead. I kind of like this one though, but to my eye, the cove neck at the bottom here changes the look of it quite a bit. It lifts that thing up and it makes it look, I don't know, like something else. And it's quite surprising to me what a difference in appearance an inch or two of neck. There's a little short neck here and there's a long neck here. And to my eye, this baluster looks quite different from this one, even though the basic form is the same. And then you get a vase on a reel. And this is a turned reel. These look like they have some detail, but they don't. It's just crumbling paint. And then here, this reel on this one was left as a square block, and I think detailed to a sheep's tongue here on the lathe, although I'm not sure. This could have been worked out on a shaper. It's kind of hard to tell. And sometimes you get this as in addition to the sheep's tongue detail on the block, you get this thing carved, as you'll see in a few slides from now in another example. And I also, you see here, there's a wrought iron railing with a spike top on the pickets that is quite at war with the balusters behind it. And that's what happens in old city neighborhoods. You get one thing and then you get another thing and you get another thing, and it just kind of builds on. And then instead of a bottle, you get a classic. I call this a cannon when I turn this shape. I don't know what other people would call it, but to me, that's a classic cannon shape. And sometimes you get a cannon with a ball, and it's even more of a cannon shape. And this is again a classical form, and I think this one looks quite good. You'll notice the spacing here is about 1-for-1. One picket, and then the space between is about the same as the width of the block. The rule, of course, is that you got to have nowhere you can get a 4-inch ball through it. And the reason for that, people think it's so baby can't get his head through, but and that's true. What happens is baby gets his body through and his head stays behind. And the general thinking is if this space is 4 inches or under, that can't happen. And in fact, the building inspectors, at least where I used to live, actually carried a 4-inch ball with them. And if they could get it through there, then you had to redo it. This is two houses side by side in the city. You can see here it's a symmetrical baluster painted white, and here again it's a cannon on top of a ball. Fairly classical, but a lot further apart than the last one we saw. Any comments up to here? You okay with this still?
That one wouldn't pass code today.
I'm sorry?
I say that one wouldn't pass code today.
I think it wouldn't. But you see an awful lot of stuff in the city that wouldn't pass code.
Is that last one, is this one, John, is that one just a bit smaller in diameter and smaller in base as well? Or is it just my eye?
No, it is. I think this is probably a 2-inch block, maybe 2 1/4, whereas the other one was a good 3-inch block. And these over here are about a 1 7/8 inch block.
Okay.
John, you're getting over in my neighborhood where I used to live. I was waiting to see my own balusters.
You might yet. I drove some of these I shot last March, and some of them when I started to think about this deck, and some of them I shot yesterday when I went back to see if I could find some more good examples. I call this a bottle. I don't know what other people would call it.
How about ugly?
Yeah, well, you see a lot of them though. You get a column on top and then a cylinder of some form, and a reel and a ring and another. This is a very classic detail here, of course, a cove, an innie and an outie with a fillet top and bottom. You see that on columns everywhere. And then here on this one behind it, I don't know what's going on with these balls on posts. It somehow doesn't go at all with the baluster, but that's kind of what you see around Lancaster.
That's Lime Street, right?
I think so. Pretty sure
you're at my neighbor, I think.
You probably so. I might have you yet. Here's some more of these. I call these broken bottles. Here's a bottle. These are bottles. They were at one time fairly elegant with their extra rings here, but then some guy decided to take attention off the bottle by painting the blocks blue. Again, it might be fun to paint them all once, but the second time around, it would be a chore you'd never ever finish. And then here,
John,
yeah,
John, just a comment. If you take this in the previous slide, just that little extra detail on the top of that bottom sort of bottle set shape makes a huge difference to the way that looks.
It does indeed. And you can see here in the similar here, this is a similar bottle to the previous slide. The colored block takes all attention away, or else it puts attention on the baluster.
Yeah.
Now this one here, this is a good example of a thing that happens with these. And we think they all have to be identical. Can you see that one of them is not identical?
Huh, no kidding.
Third from the left.
Yes, yes.
Now it took me a while to spot that, and I'm pretty sure that was a repair at some time.
Yeah.
But it's in the same family, but it's just not the same. But it took a while to see that, and I think that shows you that we can make a fetish out of having them to be identical, and it's probably okay if they're not quite identical. And I find that a relief actually when I think about turning 150 of them.
John, something else about that the last picture you had there.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I can go back. Yeah.
From my view, all the other balusters you showed, the transition from square to round, up on top at least, is concave. Like, it's cut into it concave down to the first bead, whereas this one is like an inverted salt shaker. It's a convex transition from square to bead.
Yes, and I've seen that before. Let's see this one here. It's also, but I think we see quite a few of them like that. This picket has them both ways. A donut at the top and a cove at the bottom. You see a lot of that, and it's the devil's in the details. And in figuring out what I'm going to turn, I'm going to have to figure all that out. Now, sometimes they're barely there. I mean, there's a little bit of turning here, but this is basically your builder square picket with a wee little bottle up here. And then this is pretty clearly a renovation where all these pickets have been replaced. And how can I tell? Well, these are machine turned. I mean, they're all so identical, and they're also buttered over. What you get in machine turning is you don't get any crispness in the detail. You don't get any nice right angle in there. You just get a little shallow indent where a hand turner would be able to make a sharp detail. The machine turned lathe makes a kind of a rounded detail, and it all kind of gets to be not as interesting and lacking in vigor to my eye. This is from Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. I think this is one of the more beautiful railings I've ever seen. These are just exquisitely turned. This is an interior railing, so it's cylindrical at the bottom rather than the block top and bottom. But what I like about this is the symmetry rather than trying to have it be a vertical thing that has motion. It rather as top to bottom symmetry, and I just find this extremely elegant and attractive. And this is from a house in Tupelo Hawkins Street in Philadelphia, which is the detail is an interior screen, and the baluster is these same posts where the ball in the middle has been carved. So somebody has gone to an awful lot of trouble to carve these. And when I look closely at them, the carving is as diverse as you would expect if you had hand carved those. So I rather think that these were hand turned and hand carved. Makes a very elegant presentation, a little too fussy for my taste, but very elegant nonetheless. I'm not trying to include a lot of interior stuff. It's just I had this shot.
But John, if you did those, I think Barry probably could help you out with that center part.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he could. And in the porch post section, which I'm not going to show today, there are some enormous vases with spiral twists carved into them, which I'll show you another time. Now here's again a symmetrical baluster in the city. These are pretty far apart, and one of the things that I find myself drawn to ones that have a lot of variation in thickness from thin to thick. At the same time, they're fragile, and as you'll see in this one, you see here there's this one. I don't know quite what has happened, but there's 2 blocks of wood underneath it. And then this one here, there's 1 block of wood underneath it. So this thing's been through the mill. It's had a bit of a struggle, and I think these railings, in fact. I think this is an add-on. I think this is a renovation from some time, and these maybe were interior stair balusters. I really don't know. And then here, this was a pretty nice railing until I noticed this one. And this is, again, what happens when these are too slender. They become too fragile and easy to break. And this one, of course, would not pass the 4-inch ball test either.
Would this be an example, John, of somebody using something that was intended for an inside railing on an outside porch?
I think that's exactly the case. Yeah.
What kind of wood were you thinking of using for this?
Well, that's my question. One of my questions. What kind of wood should I use? I have access to some rather nice cypress. And I think a lot of these are poplar painted when they're indoors. I don't know what the standard woods are for them. Any ideas?
Well, you'll never go wrong with white oak, which is very rot resistant. I don't use red oak. It has to be red or white oak. Cypress is a great choice because it's very, outdoor hardy. And sassafras is currently a fairly inexpensive wood that holds up very well outside.
Well, I can get Groff and Groff has some 2-inch cypress that I bought a bunch of for another project, and I can go back and get some more in an 8-inch plank, 8-inch wide, 2 inches, a generous 2 inches thick. And so I'm thinking of going to that. But even then, the wood cost for each baluster will be about $4. But when I look at the price of buying these, I mean, there are several dealers who sell these things. They are asking $25, $35 each. So 150 could run into a hell of a bill. So when I look at that and think, okay, I'm going to turn them, and I might be okay with $4 or $5 worth of wood in each one. This is another example here that I'm showing of the spacing of a symmetrical baluster, north-south. These are quite similar, really, in their geometry, although this one's got a bit more doodads. This one, they're spaced, though, there's even, the space between them is smaller than the block itself, which makes an almost impenetrable screen, versus the one up top here, which they're spaced out, I think, about 4 inches. And I think, again, Doug, these are interior pickets in this example that have been pressed into service outdoors.
Now, what are prices on that wood pre-COVID?
I don't know.
Oh, because everything's pretty much way up right now, right?
Right.
I don't know. Groff and Groff we have access to enormous, Groff and Groff is a tremendous place down in, it's about half an hour from where I live. They've got an enormous quantity of absolutely everything. There's a lot of 3-inch poplar down there and 3-inch mahogany. But I'm liking the cypress. I like this. I worked at, we made, some friends of mine and I made 40 porch brackets out of it for their porch renovation, and I quite liked working with it. Very nice material.
Just out of curiosity, that question, the price of, I know the price of pressure treated wood is up because of a lot of people renovating decks and stuff. Is the price of things like raw material for turning and some of those furniture things up as much?
I don't see that.
I don't see it.
I don't see it. Well,
I think it depends on your area, what area of the country you're in.
And what species you're looking for, too.
Depends on.
It was really skyrocketed.
I think construction lumber's gone through the roof, but, I don't think most people would think of cypress as a construction lumber. Go for a cheaper material. But I always figure if I'm going to put in the time to turn 150 pickets, I'm not going to screw around with crappy wood.
No.
Well,
It's going to be outside, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, cypress is good for that.
Cypress is a good choice.
Would you think I should paint it or should I varnish it?
I would clear coat it, but.
Would you clear coat it?
I would vote for painting it, because if you clear coat it, the form doesn't become nearly as bold as it does with paint. And it's like Windsor chairs. They're made to be painted. Well, also, a lot of these kind of outdoor things are made from Western cedar. And I turned some 11-foot-6 lampposts, 4 or 5 years ago. And in those days, each post cost $175 in materials.
Woof. So, well, okay. Well, another alternative, of course, is flat work. When I first saw this one, just driving by, it was out Chestnut Street someplace. I thought, oh, that's a nice one. And I parked the car and got out and went to have a look and saw these were flat boards. So you get that. And that led me to, here's another one that's a combo of flat work and little turning. I rather think this is a reno that somebody, did their best with the parts they had.
That previous one, John, with the flat work, you get a rather different picture if you cut those lower vases a little narrower, made more space between them.
Yes.
You could alter the pattern if you wanted to.
Yeah, well, you're going to see some more. I'm going to show you a little more flat work, and then there's a few more to go, and we're done. Let's see, there's that one. That's got a flat work and round combo. I mean, I think it's hideous, but I think it's a great try. And then this is a cafe or an old building in Bethel, Connecticut. And you would think that these were round balusters, but if you take a close look, you'll see they're bandsaw, they're square. And they almost certainly were done in the old Voggy shop there, which was opened around 1904 and closed in the late 80s. After the last Voggy brother died, but they did an awful lot of this kind of work where they would saw to look turned. It's a little hard to see in this image, and I don't have a close-up, but if you get close to one of these, you'll see that these are all 4-sided square sawn all the way down, not turned at all. I had an interesting.
They do look round.
Yeah, they sure do.
They do, yeah.
Dave, yeah, you're waving your
I'd
arm.
like to make a comment about what you want to put on the wood. I would strongly suggest that you use boiled linseed oil. It's a wood preservative. It's used by sign makers that before they paint any wood, they'll use boiled linseed oil. Then from the boiled linseed oil, you can decide if you want to do any painting on it or not. If you want to leave it natural, it preserves the wood, especially the end grain. You're not having trouble with water damage.
I think that's a good point.
Boiled linseed oil outside, though, often goes black on you. I have some very nice posts in a pergola I did 20 years ago. And I mistakenly, there is a Swedish finish that timber framers use that is like boiled linseed oil, but it doesn't go black on you.
The boiled linseed oil, when I've used boiled linseed oil outside, I believe all the times I've used it, I did paint over the top of it. So I don't know the history of it. Thank you for the information.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to paint them, but I'm not positive because I also use some of the cypress to renovate all my cast iron furniture. I got 3 or 4 of those pieces, and all the wood had rotten. So I'm painting the cast iron and replacing all the wood slats with cypress varnished. And I understand I'm going to re-varnish it, but boy, did they look great.
That's the problem with using the varnish. Any type of a clear finish, the ultraviolet rays pass through the finish, hit the wood, and bounce back, and it lifts the varnish.
Yes. Now this is a veranda in Eden on out Route 23 near my house. These are square, as you can see if you look at them. They're bandsawn square. And again, this is another one where I had to stop the car and get out to realize that they were square, not round. And here I just thought this was amazing. I mean, it's a turned round ball on top of this sawn square. I don't even know if these are cement or painted wood. I'm pretty sure they're painted wood, and that these are bandsawn square, and very nicely done, I got to say too. Okay, this is Grand Street again in Bethel, Connecticut. I use Bethel, Connecticut because I used to live there, and my son lives there. I'll get that out of the way. On Grand Street, there's a lot of houses like this. Grand Victorians with lots of porches and this kind of grill work up above and grill work here, and porch posts and grand verandas sweeping around with like hundreds of pickets. And this is one of my favorites, a Grand Street Grandee, again with a lot of pickets. And if you take a close look at this baluster, now this is what I like about it, and this is the only one I've ever seen like that. And I'm kind of partial to that. Again, I probably won't do it, but I think whoever did that was pretty confident in what they were up to.
Very attractive.
Yeah.
And then, there's always this.
Bamboo.
And that's it.
That's okay.
Are those turned or what?
No, that's actual bamboo. That's Japanese garden in Florida, I think. I have a lot of slides of that kind of stuff too that I can show you sometime. Okay, I'm going to stop the share.
So John, I have one question. Have you thought about, which I didn't see and I haven't seen before, but using multiple, like the one where you can make a pattern across the porch section by making each one slightly different?
Yes, I did that. The last time I did that. I organized a ball on the turning that rose and then came right out, and the one ball in the middle was sitting on top of the railing. And then the ball progressively got lower and lower again on the other balusters as you went around. And I kind of like that, and I've got some examples of that in a frieze in a house I found in Lancaster in the second part of this slideshow that I'm not going to show today. Yeah, so that's another idea to go. But it seems to me like when I was younger, I thought that was real clever. And now that I'm older, I think it's too clever by half. Anybody else? What wood I ought to use? What finish I ought to use?
I hate this.
What's the height of your house?
If you've got some good sharp tools, try locust.
If I could get enough of it, I might.
Locust absolutely will not rot out. It'll go as a fence post 40 years in the ground without rotting out.
And I actually know where there's a whole lot of locust logs, but I don't think they're available.
John, what's the height of your baluster you're trying to make?
Well, I'm going to make the railing 36, so the baluster will be about 30 by the time you got a 4-inch space below and thickness of the cap.
Have you thought about 1-inch dowel rods? Just cut them and drill them in.
Yeah, I thought about it. Or square pickets. I thought about those too, but what's the fun in that?
The dowel rods look better than the square pickets.
Not by much.
John, on your asking about finishing on them, when I used a product that was recommended to me for outside posts and my gazebo out front of my house is done with it. It's a product called RUBBOL, Rubal. Growers, as a local reference, Growers Paint sells it. And it's very rubberized. It's water cleanup and all, and it goes on just like latex. But when it dries, you can probably stretch it 150%.
Huh. And is it UV safe in some way?
Yeah, it's an exterior. The previous owner or some previous owner painted my whole house in it, and I found half a gallon in the basement when I bought the house, and I saw it had been purchased from Growers, and I went there and I got a few more gallons for the rework on my house. But I was very impressed by how it just, in one case, I had water come down a pith line in the one post, and it tried to exit the side, and it caused a blister in the paint, but the blister grew to about 3 inches in diameter and an inch tall before it finally ruptured, and I pulled that piece off, and it's almost like latex, I mean, like latex sheet.
Huh.
But it's water cleanup.
Very interesting. Anybody else?
I would add, one of the things I'd comment, John, is that I think I like the ones that had a little bit more simple pattern than the really, really complex ones. I think it would also be a little bit easier to, if you're making 150 of them, not to try and make them too complex at a time.
Well, I found the last time I did something like that it didn't really matter how complex it was, because by the time I'd made a dozen, I'd got figured out how to get at it and get it done. Okay. So I'm not too worried about complex, but I'm kind of liking fairly simple anyhow. I might just make cannons sitting on a ball.
It just seems to me that when you start getting it too complex, you're just making more busyness for the house and for the thing that just detracts from the work.
Yeah, it gets too fussy by half. I'm favoring the simpler ones myself too.
I believe the term for what you calling a reel is a bobbin, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And the little ring at the top is usually called an astragal bead. On most columns anyway, it's got a shoulder on both sides of it. And the hard part of turning those is to get the diameters at the edge of the shoulders, top and bottom, exactly the same, or it looks like a rubber band around the column that is squeezing it.
Yeah.
And that's the trouble. A lot of these pieces since the late 19th century have been made on Madison cutterhead lathes built in Madison, Wisconsin. And they are a huge machine, and the piece drops down a chute, comes forward, centers grab it on both ends, and it very slowly rotates while a cutterhead swings in from the back, and it mills the piece out just like a router, like a big router bit would. And it's a steel ruler, knives, actually. There's people that make this stuff. But as you pointed out, you can't get real crisp detail, especially in the base of beads. The root of all the beads are rounded. Yep. And if you paint them, they start to look worse and worse and worse.
You can always spot them. The other thing I noticed the last time I did this, and in looking around the city, it doesn't matter so much that the diameters match. It matters that the vertical heights of the elements match. So So you want to be able to see the same element all along the row, but if they're a little bit different in diameter, you're never going to see that. But you are going to see it a lot if one of them's out of alignment vertically.
You know, if you're,
I heard what Ernie said about calling out a bobbin. I think I've heard that term before. I think he may be right on that.
I think that's so too. And I often wonder what the 18th century guys called this stuff in their minds, you know.
A quick question for folks. Has anybody else done any turning of spindles to that level, like 150, that size of duplication? I know I see Ernie raise his hand, but I figured that, Ernie.
You know,
There's Angelo and Ron.
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall what it was. I forget what the job was, but I don't know what I had, a dozen or so spindles to do. And till I got started on one or two of them, I was able to run them without turning the lathe off. Just pull the tailstock back, drop them off, put one on, and just keep on going. You never turn the lathe off.
Yep, you can really get moving on them if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a pattern laying along the back that I could line up and draw some lines, and pretty quick you can get to it pretty quick.
back to the paint thing, it always, I just wonder about the whole idea of painting wood. You know, wood has a nice texture. If you use something better than junk wood, it seems a shame to put paint on it.
That's a good point.
There was a time, John, there was a time, Jim, when people didn't want to have wood paint. They wanted paint because they wanted something else in their house other than wood, plain wood showing through, which is why the paint, you know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, everything was just finished in wood pattern. So they wanted something to make the color different.
Time for it to swing back the other way in my book. You know, down in Lancaster County, the farmers use whitewash. Why don't you just whitewash them for a while and see if that'll make them interesting?
Or milk paint, which is pretty much indestructible.
David, I just want to say something about all the names of the flutes and everything else, the bugle and the vase and stuff like that. Years ago, when we had Keith Lauterbach in one time, he gave a handout and a whole mess of different spindle turnings and had names for every portion of it. And I went looking for that while you were talking there, and I couldn't find it. But if I run across it, I'll send it to you, John. Then you can post it. But he had a name for all those little things.
Now, I've seen a number of things that have names for all those little things, and they don't all agree.
And also, I guess I was up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Yeah, I was up in Portsmouth and toured some houses and indoor railings. They had spindles that were 3 different designs, and they would alternate going up the staircase.
Okay, unless there's anything more burning on this, I'm going to give the floor over to, because I know we got some other people who wanted to show some stuff. Doug, can you bring up Mike Lebo's pictures?
Yeah. So here's the first one. This is Mike Lebo's. Is this your shop, Mike?
Yeah, this is actually outside of my shop. There's a small room that I put this Harbor Freight dust collector in. I took it apart and bought the extra filter for the top from Wind Environmental down in Media, Pennsylvania. It works real well. And then the piping goes to the inside. You'll see different places that the pipe runs across the top. I made my own blast gates out of 1/4-inch plywood. They work fantastic. Everything's running well. There you can see some. Go ahead.
This is a bit of a shop tour as well as a dust collecting tour, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Now, did you figure out the drops, the pipe sizes, or you just go figure I'll start with 6 and drop down to 4 and 3?
It's actually 4-inch.
Okay.
Throughout the whole thing.
Huh.
No 6, just 4.
Did you have any pressure drops at the machines?
Now, I couldn't find any. You know, if I just turn one machine on, it really has some suction.
Okay.
that schedule 40? I mean, or schedule 20, the thin wall?
Yeah, it's drain pipe, sewer drain pipe. Nice stuff to work with.
Cool.
And at the joints, all I did was wrap the pipe with two wrappings of white duct tape, and then the 45s and the Ys fit on there really nice and tight. And I checked it for leakage, and there isn't any.
So you didn't glue them together?
No.
Huh.
When I did tie shop at home in the garage, I used metal furnace pipe, 4-inch metal pipe on mine rather than the plastic.
Is it? I assume that the only cost would be a difference in cost.
Yes, it's a big difference in cost, and the weight of it is much lighter.
Okay.
Well, I was concerned with the static in the plastic, so that's why I went with the metal.
I just watched a YouTube of a guy talking about the grounding of the system. You can't ground PVC without wrapping it totally in copper. Be cost prohibitive. So he said for somebody in a home shop, it's not necessary. If you're in a big production shop, yeah, and you want to run some pipes and run some lines through the inside of them or something. But
well, I was concerned with that, so that's why I went with the metal. But
yeah,
there was I seen some where they ran a copper ground wire through the center of the pipe, but I did that for short sections, and it jammed up with shavings.
Yeah,
well, it has to be all right, but shavings, it didn't work.
He said the biggest problem that they have with people that have had fires is something metal got into their system, and when it hit the impeller of the blower, that's what caused the fire, not the static.
You mean a spark from a metal piece sitting?
Yes, if there's dust going through there and a piece of metal hits that metal impeller, there's a potential for a fire. But
I can tell you for sure that if you are doing little 3-inch boxes and the lid goes in, the impeller is going to chop it in half. How would I know that? I have dug in there, dug them out of there 3 or 4 times, and every time they're cut in half.
Yeah, and that's what I turn. I turn all boxes, so beware of it going through.
Do you have a detail of how you made your blast gates?
I probably could.
I can see it over here.
Make something up on them.
I can see it over here on the right, at the left of the screen, going to your chop saw or shaper or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's my
planer.
There's a blast gate right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll put some pictures of it together and some dimensions, and then send them to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. And we have a picture here.
Is this Bill Davis?
Yes.
Okay, Bill Davis, you going to tell us about this?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
That's impressive, the balusters. I don't think I've turned anything the same since I started turning. So this is something that's different. I tried an acorn. This is about 5 inches round, and I just got done turning the tip for it. It's out of palm. I don't know what the other wood is. It might be black walnut. I'm not sure. And we're going to carve a leaf for the bottom. So
very nice.
Thanks.
So this is an oak on top of an oak leaf, yeah?
Yeah.
Is it?
It looks like red oak leaves with the little points on them, yeah?
Oh, maybe. No, it's actually, I think that's actually a 2x6. I think I turned it out of a 2x6. The leaf on the bottom.
Yeah.
Stuck it on the lathe and turned it thin, maybe with a little bit of, uprising on it, and then turned a little dish in the middle so it would set on there.
Okay.
That's really pretty, Bill. Does that work? Is that one piece, or does that work as a lidded box?
Yeah, it's actually hollow, and you could probably fit a quarter in the hole, I guess. You want to use it as a bank.
So it's a hollow form.
Yeah, it's a hollow form.
I don't know what other people. That looks a little bit light for me to be black walnut, or to be walnut, unless it's English walnut, and it doesn't look quite right for English walnut.
No.
What else could it be? I turned that piece over a year ago, and it's been sitting around here, and I've been wondering what to do with it. And then just last week, I, did the rest of the things. We still have to carve out the leaf so that it looks more like a leaf, but.
Is it very hard?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty hard.
And did the color change very much when you said you turned the piece a while ago? Did the color change very much when it was exposed to air?
A little bit. And then it came back when I put the oil on it. And then, of course, I used the Beal buffing system, the 3-piece. There's 3.
Wow.
And that shined it up pretty nice.
It almost looks like some mulberry I turned or black locust.
Are we talking about the same piece? You're talking about walnut being the lid, right?
No, that's black palm.
The whole thing, the bigger piece.
The body.
The body.
Don't look like walnut to me either.
No way.
Anybody else got any ideas on that?
Looks like it may be Osage orange that turned brown.
I would say it's mulberry. I got some mulberry right here. This is mulberry. How do I get it to be in the same plane as my face? Yeah, there it is. It's mulberry. It's a pot. It's that wood you got looks an awful lot like it. And we went on a wood gathering last fall out down at the Herr homestead with Roy, and the dude there, the caretaker, the dude there who was running the place, he pointed us at a log that he said was walnut, and when we got over there, we were damn sure it was mulberry, like this is. Mulberry is a great wood. It turns beautifully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember ever getting any mulberry.
Turns brown after time as it ages, right? Initially, it's not. I cut down a mulberry tree in my homestead, and
starts out yellow. Starts yellow and turns very brown.
Yeah, it darkens very quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why I was asking about changing color when it changed. What color it was when you turned it versus what color it was after time. Anyway.
I just think of it as tree wood.
Yeah.
And as long as it turns nice, I like it,
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anybody else got something they want to share this morning? Angelo.
I see Angelo, Charlie.
Something.
You got to unmute, Angelo.
What's that?
You have to, you're unmuted. Okay, what do you got?
Okay, well, I've been back to turning tricks again. So I have some pieces. I've actually turned 3 and was successful with two out of 3. These have all got to be fitted together, and they'll be painted black. They won't
Hold
be
it up a bit more.
Yeah, there.
There you go.
They won't be a natural color of wood. So this is 1, 2 that I was able to get off the lathe in good shape. And then this guy here, you can see that I missed. And I can tell you why I missed, and I figured it out after I made the hole, is that the shell for the broken one is quite a bit bigger than the shells that I was using for the smaller ones. This shell needs a bigger vase.
Yeah.
And I turned the vase for this shell with the template for this shell.
Would you pull one of those up again and show us what goes on in there? No, the finished piece.
You want to see the whole thing?
Yeah, I want to see the whole thing, and I struggle to understand what's going on.
Okay, so this is the vase.
Yeah.
The magician will show the ball. He'll dump the ball out.
Well, hold it up again. Yeah.
Hold it out. He'll multiply the ball. Now, I'm not a magician, but he multiplies the ball so the audience sees this. He vanishes the solid ball and puts the shell back in place so that it looks like a ball, puts the lid back on the vase and shows it again empty.
Lift up again. We can't see that last move.
There you go.
And now show us the lid with the ball hidden in it. Okay, so how does that work?
How does this work? Well, I have to kill you after I tell. So The pieces that were made in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the shell was integral with the ring. So you couldn't hand off the vase after you performed the trick. But then someone came up with the idea of leaving the shell loose so that you could push the solid ball through, including the shell. So when you showed it to the audience, the audience would see this, and then you'd multiply it and see that.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
So let's see if I can manage something similar. My hands are slippery from sanding. So they would multiply it like that. You can put both back in the vase. You can redo the whole thing. You can hand off the shell. I mean, you can palm the shell and hand off the vase with nothing in it for people to inspect. And there's nothing, the magicians call it, you can be clean. So if this has been ferreted away in a pocket or a vest pocket, he's clean, his hands are got nothing in them, the vase has got nothing in them, but we know that there's a shell and a ball somewhere.
That's incredible. How many of those have you made?
In varying styles, I'm up in the 400 range, 500 range.
Wow. Wow. And most of them are magicians have them.
All of the pieces I've made are in magicians' collections. I don't think that they use them because they pay dearly for them. So I originally started making replicas of antique pieces because the antique pieces became too valuable for the magicians to take on the road, and they would take my replica instead. But now my replicas are getting pricey, so they put those up on the shelf too. I don't know exactly what they use.
So
plastic.
One of the things you showed me when I last visited you is you've got wood for these things stashed and wrapped up to maintain its dryness.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can also see behind me on the shelves there are boxes, and they're all labeled. There are boxes of shells and balls. Let's see, I can pull one out.
And how thick are the shells? Like a 16th or less?
Yeah, 16th or less. So this is on my list of things to do. So with two of these vases, you can make a color changing ball. You can make a red ball turn into an orange ball, or a red shell turn into an orange shell. So that's why we have these different colors. But each one of those is a vase. You can see that I've got them labeled for the material type.
Is it mostly cherry that you're working with?
I'm sorry?
Is it mostly cherry?
It's cherry in the larger picture, it's mostly cherry because I could get it in the sizes I need. I would have to dry it, but I could get it. You also use maple. These are maple shells. This one will never leave my house. This one is sandalwood. So that's the only piece of sandalwood I've ever seen. So it'll stay with me. My idea was that these were going to be for sale for the magicians, but here's a piece of desert ironwood burl. So I have desert ironwood burl in blanks for a size like this, sitting in a box waiting to turn.
So how many half-built ones have you got stashed away?
Oh, Christmas. Let's see, 1836, 56, 60, maybe 100. And they take about an hour and a half to turn each phase. In other words, this what you see is about an hour and a half's worth of work. But before I get to the part where I can turn the outside, I've got to do all the work on the inside. So all of the hollowing,
Could I just add, Angelo, that that's an hour and a half after 400.
I'm sorry?
It's an hour and a half work after you've made 400 of the damn things. It's not an hour and a half work for us beginners.
No, you could do it in an hour and a half.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Takes me almost an hour and a half just to get a ball, let alone one that thin.
Well, you know, I buy the balls pre-turned. I used to turn them from scratch, but that took so long. I said, in fact, I have a ball that Ernie turned for a demonstration for a company by the name of Full Circle. I still have that somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I still got it. So I started to buy balls that were already turned at Hobby Lobby or wherever. And I found that I would have to buy a bigger size because they turn them slightly green and they go oval. So even though I bought a sphere, it's not a true sphere. So what I have in inventory or ready to turn are balls that were returned from a slightly larger size, and those will be the last I'll make. So my journey is to get through the important pieces that are important to me, and then I'm done with that part, and I won't make them anymore.
I remember you talking about finishing them and putting a coat of finish on tightens them up. You got to allow for finish when you're making them.
Oh yeah, well,
sizing.
Well, if you look at this cherry, I don't know if you're going to be able to see in the photograph, but you can see that the bead doesn't sit properly from the lid to the piece below.
Yeah.
And that's because after I've turned it, it's moved a little bit. So I have to refit the shell. I have to refit the lid. And really, it's only going to be done with sandpaper. It's not going to be done with a gouge or a skew or a parting tool or anything like that, because the tolerances are too small.
Well, what are the tolerances? Like 1/100 of an inch in there?
No. Let's see. If you can hear that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tolerance in there. In this one, there is no tolerance. So, yeah, it's plus or minus. They're made to fit within themselves. They're not interchangeable with one another.
So each one is unique. Each one is
a little bit, unique, a little bit different than the other. And if you excuse me for 1 minute, I'll get you an antique one.
Yeah, well, we're at the end of the hour, but anyone will carry on here a little bit and let him go get it.
Did you have something, Randy Smith?
Everybody who knows me knows I make pens, and I got this on the International Association of Pen Turners website, and all it is it's made of metal. They were selling these for $15, and you can take and
very good.
That's great.
Very good, Randy.
I made one of these. I got it, and you can get them engraved with a name. So
it can be Sir Lancelot.
Yeah.
Okay.
In a pensive mood.
Okay, I'm going to formally say thank you all, but I'm going to stay on because we're waiting for Angelo to come back with an antique one to show us. So here he is.
Hey, I'm here.
Spotlight you again, Angelo.
Okay, here's the antique one. This was turned by a fellow by the name of Floyd Thayer, and this was done in the early 1900s. Floyd was the master wood turner of magic of his time, and this is turned, I believe it's maple. And you can see that here the shell is an integral part of the ring, so you can't dump out the ball and hand off the base. You have to just put the trick away at the end of the show. So that's old.
Very
and
nice.
It's been reworked. It's been refinished. You can see that the paint job on the shell is different than the paint job on the solid ball. I keep it the way I have it. He's left a little divot where he was driving it.
Does those have a little, does the ball on top move up and down to push the ball out? I've seen them like that too.
Yeah, I make those too. These are called ball boxes. What you're talking about is what they call the Morrison pill box, where you have the same kind of condition, but there are two halves of a shell ball that are pressed together when you press the finial.
Aha.
And next time I come on, I'll have one to show for you.
That'd be great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Now, do you do most of this work in just jam chucks?
Nope, I use an Axminster chuck. So the diameter of the wood that I'm turning is pretty much the diameter of the steel jaws on the wood, on the chuck.
Yeah.
So that I'm able to grab the pieces right directly in the chuck. If I'm afraid of putting a dent in the wood, I'll put a piece of masking tape around where I'm going to grab it. But mostly it goes wood to steel.
Now the balls, though, you must do the balls in the jam chuck.
The balls I do between centers with a little compression chuck. Turn it true, then turn it 90 degrees, turn it true again, and be done with it.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah.
Which I learned from you, I think. Yeah.
Well, I learned it from somebody else.
John, before everyone logs off, I'd like to say thanks to all our guests for showing up, all you guys from around the country.
Sure.
We appreciated having everybody in. Alaska, New York, everywhere else.
Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed it.
I don't know where Bill Davis is from. Bill, where are you from?
Bucks County.
Bucks County. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I remember you. Yeah. And David and Eleanor Miner, where are you guys from?
Just was invited by Roy Johnson. I'm in Maryland. I'm at the beginning of my hobby.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for you guys who have clicked on, if you got my invitation even passed along to you, send me an email and I'll put you on the list and you'll get your own invitation. Coffee hour is free to woodworkers anywhere. And we will be back next week next Thursday at 10 o'clock. And if you've got something you want to show or a slideshow or a little video or some work you want to hold up, you have three choices with that. You can hold it up beside your ear. You can send the pictures to Doug and he'll share the screen, or you can share the screen yourself and we'll bear with you while you figure out how to do it.
And if you don't have one,
thank you.
If you don't have my email, you can send it to John and whoever. So
I'll send them on to him anyhow. Anything you send to me that's pictures, I send them on to Doug. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all for showing up.
Have a good week.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Good week.
Thank you, John.
Week and
Everybody.
Thanks. So, John, I was looking at that Russian tool that we showed last week afterwards during the talk hour, and I'd like to maybe bring up the subject again because to me, the skew that they showed or what looked to be a skew handle showed in Russia with the round tool on steel on the bottom looked like it was almost like a fingernail gouge, would behave like a fingernail gouge, or something like that for spindle turning, and might be as a result, a lot easier to use. I think it'd be an interesting comment or discussion to have among the larger group sometime.
Well, when I saw that spear-like tool the lady was using, it seemed to me that it was like a skew, except it was, at the business end, it was a skew, but it looked like a spear.
Yes, it did. And I was thinking about this a long way. The fact of the matter is that the round shank of that skew as opposed to the flat shank of a skew that we know, means that the whole turning action when you're using it is significantly different.
Yes.
And because that shank is round, it makes it smoother and easier to roll.
And I also think that tells you that was forged by a local blacksmith starting from a rod.
Well, I noticed them up for sale on the internet. I looked it up and there's some guy selling them for $125 a piece here in the States. If you want to get one.
What's it called?
It was they just called it a Russian skew or something like that.
Can you send me the link to that and I'll put it in the follow-up?
I'll find it again and send you the link.
Okay.
I wasn't here last week, Doug. Did you do a thing on the Russian doll thing?
We found a video that we showed.
Okay.
And if you watch the video of last week, which is on our website, it's embedded in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I found a second video, but Mike, if you just look up Russian wood turning on YouTube,
yeah,
it'll come up. There's the one that we saw was one on how it's made, but there's a second one of a guy just making a goblet and it uses a skew that's different and also uses a hook tool for the inside that's quite different.
Yeah.
When I went on to Etsy thinking for a moment or two that I might sell some of the 60 or so goblets I made when I was figuring that out last year, there's a guy in Russia selling goblets for $45 a pair. And I guess that's what they're from.
Yeah. Well, since it took him about 5 minutes to make a goblet on his lathe when he had it down, I can understand why he got it for $45 a pair, because he was really turning them out in a hurry.
Well, that's the virtue of turning a loss to something. That's why I would take on 150 balusters. I like the result when they're all done, but I also want the increase in skill I'm going to get from doing it.
Yeah. Well, to me, the biggest thing about the skew and the one I'm talking back and forth about, my concern is always people saying about the catches and how difficult it is. And I'm realizing that it may be more because of the flat handle or the flat shank of the skew that causes the catches, because it requires a more delicate maneuver to make a bead or a cove with that handle, as opposed to just a flat shape.
I'm thinking it's maybe the other way around.
You think it's, well?
I think that the round shank that those you see in the Russian video, that's going to make it very hard to use.
Oh. Well, that's a point of debate. Maybe that is a whole point of debate we can get into.
Yep.
On that
okay.
Thank you, guys.
Several oval skews that I got from Robert Sorby.
Yeah.
And I find that those are much easier to use than a flat square.
See, my experience is opposite. I can't use them at all, and I can use a flat one pretty good.
So how different we all are.
Yeah, that's what makes it. So it makes it a horse race.
All right, got to run.
Okay, thank you guys. Good meeting today. See you all next week.